it was a time when I was feeling quite low.
Well, it was January and you were at high school.
Yeah, so that kind of stands to reason. There's a picture of us, our year 11 Christmas do at a bowling alley, and we both look incredibly depressed.
I can't think why. The other pictures are all of like groups of kids having fun.
Dive bombing into the photos, hurling bowls down the alleys.
There's one picture of us, just you and I, sat in a corner, looking really maudlin.
Yes. So, January the song comes from a few weeks after that in the scheme of things, although Christmas 2001 and January 2002 can feel like distant eras at that age. It comes from that time of feeling a little bit lost and probably these kind of floods of emotion and longing and melancholy hitting me. And we were at high school, which is no great environment for two sensitive, flowery sort of introverts.
Luckily we were all right.
So emotionally that's where it came from. And I think it's maybe one of the first times that I remember that feeling of New Year's Eve not necessarily being a happy time.
When was Dark Night Sky? Were you 15 when you wrote that?
Dark Night Sky was a few months earlier.
So it was the same sort of winter period. So it was like bookended by those two songs.
Yes.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it is. For somebody who's probably dealing with depression for the first time, but not knowing it, they're remarkably articulate ways of expressing that for what is essentially a kid.
You turned it into a pop song.
Yes, yeah, which is the best treatment for depression in my opinion.
Well, you were just talking about Taylor Swift in the same context.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But it was a very different act, I think, that fed into January musically. So for our music coursework, GCSE 2002 at this point, we had to do a composition and a performance, and I chose Everybody Hurts by R.E.M. And I remember doing it sat in the corner of the school assembly hall. There was a kind of mock music setup, and it was just me and an acoustic guitar, facing towards the lunch canteen, which was a place that I feared because it was a kind of place of noise and chaos and, you know, dissonant voices all bouncing off the walls. And looking at that school canteen, playing Everybody Hurts, it kind of connected with me that it felt like the perfect song for somebody that doesn't quite fit in and is looking at the world beyond them and kind of being freaked out by it. And the song seemed like a perfect emotional expression of that. So if you think about Everybody Hurts, it's a finger-picking song. And so was January.
But it's the pauses that make it. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, I never thought of that.
And so I think January, what I was trying to express emotionally is fairly clear to me. But what I think I was trying to express musically was to write my Everybody Hurts by R.E.M.
Yeah.
So, what are your recollections of when January was written?
Well, it's quite funny because our music room at school was strange because there was the classroom, but there was a sort of labyrinth of rooms that led off from it.
Yes, there was.
There was one big room adjacent to the classroom that had the drum kit in.
Yeah.
And I don't really know why we were allowed in there. I think our music teacher kind of took pity on us because on our lunch breaks we'd just go to that music room and he let us lock ourselves in.
We were having a conversation last night about our kind of misfit status at school, not kind of emotionally typical of what you might consider boys in our era and not really bonding with a lot of other kids, and not necessarily being kind of gender typical perhaps of kids our era.
I was saying what seemed really symbolic in hindsight was that our little enclave of peace would be interrupted by the thwacking of the football against the wind. We shut the blinds, but there'd be the constant footballs kicked against the window by the real boys.
And we'd be terrified.
We would sit and ostensibly practice. I'd practice drums, you'd practice guitar, but really it was a sanctuary for us, wasn't it? It was a little escape, a little safe space, a haven, where we'd eat our lunch and we'd talk, but we'd write songs.
Yes.
But back in those days, we'd be in that music room, and it seemed, at least to me, every day you would come in with a new song, because you were very prolific. And it seems funny now, knowing you as I do, as someone who takes a very long time to craft things, that you would write a song about January in January and come in that day with it, But that's how it was in those days. And I was always completely amazed by your ability, because I was never a songwriter. I would write bits of lyrics and things, and I liked playing drums, but I couldn't ever play guitar or keyboard, or I just couldn't get my head around it, and I could never craft a melody or anything, the way you could, and I was always amazed. But that was a kind of it was like a gear shift, because I thought everything you did was brilliant. But that, I remember just being convinced that was going to be a huge hit single. And I think, in the grand scheme of things, we weren't that far away from the release of The Man Who. And I think there was something about the atmosphere of it. That you say it's very finger-picky R.E.M. thing. I think the sort of indiness of the original version, the coldness of it was very Travis, I thought. And I could just hear it as one of those singles that were prevalent at the time. And I was really excited of all the songs to be, 23 years later, to be revisiting. Of course it's January, because to me that was your maturity as a songwriter. And it struck me then when we were 14, 15, however old we were. And I still think it's a fantastic song.